Okay, it's kind of an interesting time in American history concerning what we know as the space race, because on October 4th of 1957, Russian scientists shocked the world when they lifted the first satellite into orbit. On October 4th, 1957, Russian scientists shocked the world as they lifted the first satellite into orbit. Now, it wasn't a big satellite, it only weighed 184 pounds, and it was known as Sputnik 1. Sputnik 1. So on October 4th, 1957, Russian scientists shocked the world as they lifted the first satellite into orbit. And the satellite weighed 184 pounds, and it was known as Sputnik 1. A month later, the Russians launched Sputnik 2, which weighed 1,120 pounds and actually carried a dog into space. So the second satellite, which was launched a month later in November of 1957, weighed 1,120 pounds and it actually carried a dog into space.
Did it die?
We'll get to that.
That's horrible.
Now, this whole thing really shattered American self-confidence, because what people saw is America's taking a back seat to communism. We're behind in this race for greatness and race to space. Americans were horrified. Now you think about that. This is 1957. If they could fire satellites into space, what else could they put in space? Intercontinental ballistic missiles? Nukes? So this scared the United States to death, that they actually had the ability to send satellites into orbit. Okay? What's next? If they could fire heavy objects into space, they certainly could reach the United States with intercontinental ballistic missiles. So what we know as rocket fever spread across the United States. And Americans got panicked. They believed that students in the United States were falling far behind the learning curve of Soviet students, especially in which two areas? Math and science. So people began to panic. My God, our communist foes are beating us in the race for space. Their students evidently must be smarter than our students, especially in the area of math and science, if they're ahead of us in this endeavor. Well, we decided we better get in gear and try to get something up in space too to keep up. And so on February 1st of 1958, we sent our first satellite into space. It didn't even have a name, it was so pitiful. It weighed 30.8 pounds. So we were way, way behind in this race for space. On February 1st, 1958, the United States sent up their first satellite, launched it into orbit, weighed 30.8 pounds. Well, because of this, in 1958, the government did something that actually helped me when I went to college. They established the National Defense Education Act. The National Defense Education Act. And that was done late in 1958 after witnessing us falling way behind in the race for space. Does anybody know what the National Defense Education Act did? You want to guess what it did? If it even affected me in 1978, 79, 80, 81, and still is a form of this today. What did the National Defense Education Act do, do you think? It authorized $887 million in loans to needy college students. Now, I'm going to get back to what Dalton said because he's correct. So it authorized $887 million in loans to give to college so they'd go to their students, so they'd go to college so they could get caught up and be as smart as these Russian students. So late in 1958, the National Defense Education Act was passed, and it authorized $887 million in loans to give to needy college students. Now, as Dalton stated, within that 887 million, there were specific monies that were targeted for what? If you went into science and math. Okay, so there were specific monies targeted within that that were only for students that went into science and math. But it did give loans to all other students too, because the philosophy was our students must not be as smart as Russian students if these people are shooting satellites into space way before we do. Now, we're going to get way back. When we get into the 60s in Kennedy's administration, we're going to start a project right over there, if you look, called the Mercury Project, and we're going to pick 7 astronauts to be our first astronauts, or 7 military pilots to be our first astronauts, and that'll be the Mercury Project. But that will come early in Kennedy's administration, and we'll get to that later. But the reason we went to Mercury is because how far we were falling behind. What do you think is going to have to be established to get that going? The famous NASA, which is not even in the ballpark yet. We'll talk about it. Okay, we're going to move to 1957 at a glance. 1957 at a glance. Now this will be a little more detailed. We'll give you some handouts on this. And the first month is going to be a little lengthy on what happened because I want to tell you about a certain individual. So if we talk about 1957 at a glance, we're going to talk about January 5th. January 5th. And what happened on January 5th, 1957, is professional baseball player Jackie Robinson announced that he would retire from professional baseball. On January 5th of 1957, professional baseball player Jackie Robinson announced that he will retire from professional baseball. Anybody know who Jackie Robinson is? Boy, if you don't, we need to know this. Anybody know who Jackie Robinson is? Okay, he was a professional baseball player, and he broke the color barrier when he became the first black athlete to play in Major League Baseball. Okay, I don't know if you know this or not, but the number 42, which he wore, is retired in all of baseball. Nobody wears the number 42 except when they celebrate Jackie Robinson Day, when everybody wears number 42. Everybody wears the same jersey on Jackie Robinson Day. Now, I'll tell you a little bit about him because I think it's really important you know about this guy because he's just one of the influential people in breaking the color barrier in the United States. Jackie Robinson signed with the Brooklyn Dodgers. Now they're the Los Angeles Dodgers, but before that they were the Brooklyn Dodgers out of New York in 1947. And again, this was very unusual because nobody was playing black athletes at this time. So Jackie signed with the Brooklyn Dodgers in 1947, and he had quite a career. He was Rookie of the Year in 1947 during that first year. He was Rookie of the Year in 1947. He was the most valuable player in baseball in 1949. And he became a World Series champion in 1955. And he only had a 10-year career. That's really not a real long career today in professional sports, but he had a 10-year career. And he not only was a great baseball player, but he was a very vocal civil rights advocate, okay, activist, okay? So throughout his 10-year career, not only was he a great baseball player, but he also distinguished himself as a vocal civil rights activist as well. I'll tell you a little bit about Jackie Robinson. It's a good story. He was born in 1919 in Georgia, the youngest of 5 children. He was born in 1919 in Georgia and was the youngest of 5 children. Now, he wasn't the only talented athlete in his family. His older brother Matthew won a silver medal in the 200-meter dash in the 1936 Olympics. So he wasn't the only good athlete in his family. His older brother Matthew won the silver medal in the 200-meter dash in the 1936 Olympics, which by interest was held in Berlin, which during the beginning of the Nazi regime and Hitler. You know who won the gold medal in the 200 meters? Jesse Owens. I'm sure you've heard of Jesse Owens. So he finished second behind gold medalist Jesse Owens. So he came from an athletic family. This was kind of unusual for Jackie at the time. He attended junior college, and then he continued his education after the 2 years in junior college, and he went to UCLA. Well, if you can believe this, at UCLA, he became the university's first student athlete to win varsity letters in 4 different sports. He won varsity letters in 4 different sports at UCLA. Football, basketball, track, and baseball. He's an incredible athlete. So at UCLA, Jackie Robinson became the university's first student athlete to win varsity letters in 4 different sports. Football, basketball, track, and baseball. Well, he didn't finish college because he had no money to do so. Due to financial hardship, he was forced to leave UCLA. And what did he do around 1941 after leaving UCLA? 1941, like a lot of athletes did. He joined the United States Army after the events of Pearl Harbor. So Jackie was forced to leave UCLA just shy of graduation due to financial hardship, and after the events of Pearl Harbor, he joined the United States Army. This is kind of interesting. Write down what you want. So he's in boot camp at Fort Hood, Texas. And he gets arrested and court-martialed for something he did. He gets arrested and court-martialed. You know what he did? You know what he did, J.C. Page? He refused to give up his seat in the segregated bus, and was arrested for that and court-martialed. So during boot camp at Fort Hood, Texas, Jackie was arrested and court-martialed for refusing to give up his seat and move to the back of a segregated bus. Can you believe that? It's just hard to believe in today's world. Well, he didn't like that, his friends didn't like it, and the NAACP didn't like that. And so they shed public light on the injustice, and he was acquitted of those charges and received an honorable discharge from the United States Army. So he didn't stand pat like a lot of would have took it. He complained, his friends got on the bandwagon, they got a hold of the NAACP. They shed light on how unjust this was, and he was eventually acquitted of any charges and was given an honorable discharge from the military. Well, in 1944, after he was discharged, he began to play professional baseball, but he had to play in the Negro League because they didn't allow black players in Major League Baseball. So he leaves the Army in 1944 and begins to play professional baseball in the Negro League. That was very common. Negroes, prior to Jackie Robinson breaking the color barrier, played in the Negro League. They had their own league. They had their own championship, but it was all Negroes. It was segregated. Well, a man stood up under a lot of pressure and changed the world forever when the president of the Brooklyn Dodgers, Branch Rickey, signed Jackie Robinson and integrated Major League Baseball. Gives me goosebumps to tell you. Somebody had to stand up. Branch Rickey, who's on your ID sheet, he was the president of the Brooklyn Dodgers, and he had the gall and the guts to sign Jackie Robinson and integrate Major League Baseball. So in 1946, Jackie joined the Montreal Royals. The Montreal Royals, which were what for the Dodgers? Minor league farm team. Okay? If you know anything a lot about baseball in the major leagues, these people don't go straight to the major leagues. They have, Pioneer League, they have AA, AAA, Single A. Like the Billings Mustangs have a professional baseball team in Billings. And that's a Single A farm team of the Cincinnati Reds. Okay? Matter of fact, they signed some big-time high school player this year, and he got like a $5 million signing bonus from the Reds, and they assigned him to Billings, Montana to play in the rookie league. He's been quite a sensation. But Branch Rickey sent him to the Montreal Royals to get ready to be a major league player. Now, Branch Rickey was very much a counselor, maybe even a father figure to Jackie Robinson, because he knew there were going to be difficult times for Jackie Robinson when he was signed to play Major League Baseball. And he sat him down and he said, "You got to promise me when you get confronted with racism, you do not fight back. Don't fight back. Take it like a man. Do the best you can." So Branch Rickey knew there would be difficult times for Robinson, so he made Jackie promise not to fight back when confronted with racism. Well, that year in the minor leagues with the Montreal Royals, he led the entire minor leagues all across the country. Every single minor league team, for every single team in the majors, he was the highest hitting baseball player in the minor leagues that year. He had a 349 average, and he had a 985 fielding average. What does that mean if you have a 985? What's a perfect fielding average? 1.000. So he made very few errors. He had a really great minor league year. And because of that, they moved him up to the major leagues, and he became the first black athlete to play Major League Baseball on April 15, 1947. So his efforts in the minor leagues resulted in him being moved up to the major leagues, where he debuted on April 15, 1947, played in his first game and became the first black athlete ever to play Major League Baseball. Was he harassed during that time? Did he persevere? Yes, he did. In his first year in the major leagues, he hit 12 home runs, and the Dodgers won the National League pennant. What does that mean if you win the National League pennant? Who's going to win the National League pennant this year? Either the Cubs, the Nationals, or the Dodgers. Okay, that's the National League championship. They call it the pennant. And if you win the pennant, then you get to go to the World Series. Okay, so they won the pennant that first year and went to the World Series. Now, this is kind of an interesting statistic. You don't see this much. During his 10-year career, Jackie Robinson stole home 19 times. You never see that. Nobody ever steals home. That's where, when the pitcher goes into his windup, you would have to run from third to home and beat the throw there and be safe. That's a little difficult. I don't know. I'd have to look up to see the last time somebody in the major leagues stole home. It doesn't happen anymore. It's just, you can't do it. It's impossible almost. He did it 19 times in his career. Eventually, he became the highest paid athlete on the Dodgers team, which was really unusual. So as an African American or Negro player to be the highest paid athlete on your team, does that open the doors for other African American players? And it sure did, including such players as Willie Mays and Hank Aaron. Willie Mays and Hank Aaron. Here's a signed picture of Willie Mays. Willie Mays and Hank Aaron really benefited from the success of Jackie Robinson. After baseball, he became active in business. And he worked for a company, a coffee company called Chock Full of Nuts. You ever heard of that? I bet some, when have you heard it from?
I don't know, I just know.
I bet I can figure it out here. Has anybody heard of the coffee company Chock Full of Nuts? Let's see, I think maybe you have. I don't know how you guys are moviegoers. You ever seen the movie Bucket List? Morgan Freeman and Jack Nicholson both have cancer. What were they buried in? They were buried in a can of Chock Full of Nuts coffee. They wanted their ashes put into Chock Full of Nuts coffee. Okay, it's kind of comical. When I first watched that, I thought, well, that's a bit of history that not everybody knows. Are you missing one? Okay, what this is, real quickly, I'll interrupt the lecture, is this is a letter that Jackie Robinson wrote to the President of the United States on May 13th, 1958. Who was the President? Eisenhower. Okay, here's what he wrote right on the letterhead. The White House received that on May 14th or May 11th, I can't tell by the stamp. But it says, "My dear Mr. President, I was sitting in the audience at the summit meeting of Negro leaders yesterday when you said we must have patience. On hearing you say this, I felt like standing up and saying, 'Oh no, not again.' I respectfully remind you, sir, that we have been the most patient of all people. When you said we must have self-respect, I wondered how we could have self-respect and remain patient considering the treatment accorded us through the years. 17 million Negroes cannot do as you suggest and wait for the hearts of men to change. We want to enjoy our rights that we feel we are entitled to as Americans. This we cannot do unless we pursue aggressively goals which other Americans achieved over 150 years ago. As the chief executive of our nation, I respectfully suggest that you unwittingly crush the spirit of freedom in Negroes by constantly urging forbearance and giving hope to those pro-segregation leaders like Governor Faubus, who would take from us even those freedoms we now enjoy. Your own experience with Governor Faubus is proof enough that forbearance and not eventual integration is the goal the pro-segregation leaders seek. In my view, an unequivocal statement backed up by actions such as you demonstrated, you could take the last fall in dealing with Governor Faubus, if it became necessary, would let it be known that America is determined to provide in the near future for Negroes the freedoms we are entitled to under the Constitution. Respectfully yours, Jackie Robinson. Gives you a little bit of an example of his activism on civil rights. Chock full of nuts. Okay? Jackie actually then served on the board of the NAACP until 1967. And he was the first African American player to be inducted into the Baseball Hall of Fame. Okay? He served on the board of the NAACP until 1967 and was the first African American player ever to be inducted into the Baseball Hall of Fame. In 1972, the Dodgers